It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Venezuela woke up this morning to 6 battleships and 1 submarine from the United States sailing along and underneath its waters. And in the wake of the visit of the 7 European dwarfs to Washington, D.C., we will be assessing exactly where we stand. It's difficult to because Donald Trump seems to be in a state of total confusion after the little mini invasion of the little mini European statesman. And the giant, Mohammadshalan, the great star of the Palestinian national basketball team, was buried today. Yesterday, he was murdered by Israeli gunfire in Khan Yunis, trying to collect bread for his family. At this moment in time, no star basketball player anywhere in the world has given a fuck. You've come to the right place. This is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Last week, Israel murdered the captain of the Palestine national football team. Nobody gave a fuck amongst the upper reaches of the football world. Not FIFA, not UEFA, and no single prominent footballer until Mohammed Salah, somewhat belatedly but brilliantly, spoke out. But only Mohammed Salah, nobody else. No Leo Messi, no Cristiano Ronaldo, none of the legion of Arab and Muslim footballers playing in the top leagues of the European continent said anything at all. Not even condolences, never mind a condemnation. And today was buried Mohammadshalan, a giant Palestinian basketball player from the national basketball team. And as I said, At this moment in time, not a single star of the NBA, not anyone who's anyone in the world of basketball has even lamented the passing of one of their fellow sportsmen. And definitely the basketball authorities in the world are not likely to be more proactive in taking action against Israel than the football authorities were. Donald Trump sent 6 warships and 1 submarine off the coast of Venezuela this morning. What's that about? Well, he doesn't rule out a boots-on-the-ground invasion of the vast territory of Venezuela with its government, which, let me put it this way, would be itching for a fight with the 4,000 US Marines that Donald Trump has on board these warships. He hasn't ruled out, Donald Trump, a landing, boots-on-the-ground invasion. All in the interests of fighting the drug cartels, of course. Nothing to do with the fact that Venezuela is the world's largest oil-producing country, and that Venezuelan oil is perfectly suited to the American refinery market. Nothing to do with creating yet another war when the wars he's already deeply involved and implicated in are, despite his repeated protestations, not yet resolved. We'll be watching that one closely, but Donnie, take it from me, as someone who's been to Venezuela many times, as someone who knows the prevailing atmosphere in Venezuela rather well. The worst thing you could do is put American boots on the ground in Venezuela, because be sure the boots will be empty before you can say Jackie Robinson, and the previous occupants of those boots will be being shipped back to the United States in wooden boxes. Speaking of which, the 7 dwarfs who accompanied Snow White, if you get my drift, Volodymyr Zelensky, into the lion's den in Washington, D.C. just a couple of days ago were, well, humiliated is not really the word, is it? I mean, when you compare and contrast even the Angela Merkel days, when she was photographed angrily confronting a Donald Trump visibly moving backwards in his chair, such was the ferocity of her assault, the 7 dwarfs sat like Dumpy, Dozy, Grumpy, and the rest. And when they did speak, they served only to make a fool of themselves. Let me deal with the situation, though, that their visit has resulted in. It was clear when Donald Trump left Alaska that the Ukraine war was on its way to a solution. All he had to do was impose that solution on Volodymyr Zelensky, which I have no doubt, given the difference in stature of the two men, he could easily have done. Whilst Zelensky was being berated and was being cajoled by Donald Trump into doing what's necessary, the 7 dwarfs were nursing their wrath outside, and little Zelensky knew it and therefore played hardball, because he knew that he was not quite alone. If Donald Trump had done what he no doubt promised Vladimir Putin that he was going to do, then we might well be talking tonight about an end to the Ukraine war, but we are not. We are instead talking about the dangerous maneuvers on which these 7 dwarfs have now embarked, and which endanger not just the people of Ukraine, but the people of all of Europe, and beyond that, the whole of the world. What do I mean? Well, Trump, under pressure from the dwarfs, has conceded that European NATO members can and should take up their places on the Ukrainian front line as a kind of tripwire. as a kind of security guarantee, they call it. Though in truth it's a guarantee of total insecurity. It's a guarantee that the war will never end. And if it ended, would only be a precursor of the war to come. Because Russia has made it clear from the very beginning and before the beginning of this phase of the NATO-Russia war, fought over the bodies, dead bodies, 1 million dead Ukrainian bodies, that no NATO army will be permitted next door to Russia in Ukraine. That is the reddest of red lines. It's the hardest of all red lines. And whether they're badged as NATO armies or as British armies, French armies, German armies, Danish armies, Dutch armies, or the yapping chihuahuas of the Baltic states, if they're in NATO and they're in Ukraine, then NATO is in Ukraine. And that will be the cause, immediately, of a general European war. Now, that much any idiot can understand. And there are a large number of idiots, as latest opinion polling makes clear, who have no idea who's who, what's what, when was when in the Ukraine conflict. But any idiot can understand this. If a country's army, which is a country in NATO, sets foot in Ukraine, there will be an all-out European war. This much is obvious. But when I tell you the next bit, a very large number of people begin to push back at me. I'm telling you that that general European war would have to become a nuclear war. Why? Because when one side or the other began to prevail, the side that was losing would have to have recourse to nuclear weapons rather than face, if it was the NATO army, the cataclysmic humiliation of actual defeat at the hands of Russian arms, or if it was the Russian side against whom the situation was prevailing, it would be existential. Russia's entire existence would be in peril, in danger, if a NATO army, British, German, French, Danish, Dutch, if that army began to prevail against Russia on a conventional battlefield, what do you think Russia would do? What would any nuclear-armed superpower do when being defeated on its own territory, on its own threshold? That much surely is obvious. And if it's not obvious to you, I'm here to tell you, listen to me. If a general war begins between Russia and these European members of NATO, it inevitably will turn nuclear. And then, what next? Well, it goes without saying that in a nuclear exchange, the country that was losing would have to step up the range and power of its nuclear weapons that it was deploying. And it would have to ask the United States of America to enter the war on its behalf. And if America entered the war on their behalf, then Russia would be at war with America and would be talking not battlefield nuclear weapons, not intermediate range nuclear weapons, not nuclear war in Europe, but hypersonic, intercontinental, ballistic nuclear war across the oceans. Now, I then get some idiots who say, well, Britain's got nuclear weapons too, yes. And the British Trident submarines if given permission from Washington, a key caveat, might well be able to fire off their nuclear weapons and would bring about huge death and destruction on the vast country of Russia, the biggest country in the world. But that would make no difference, even if the entire Russian leadership, military and political, was killed in their situation room, even if every one of the decision makers in Russia was killed by British submarines, Britain would still, moments later, cease to exist, because the dead man's switch is already primed and the weapons are already aimed at London, Glasgow, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds. Britain would cease to exist. Do you understand what I'm saying to you here? Do you understand how serious that is? And yet, knowing this, Keir Starmer, what was that big burst lip that he had, by the way, when he was in Washington? Mrs. Macron thump him? Or was he putting his mouth in places that it was unwise to put it? Keir Starmer is desperate to get, to quote the Defence Secretary John Healey, British boots on the ground in Ukraine. Well, I repeat what I said to you on Sunday. I really mean it. I mean it because I know it. Because I know the visceral hatred between Britain and Russia on both sides. Any British troops putting their boots on Ukrainian soil will be eliminated, annihilated. They will be destroyed before any other country's army. So why is the British Prime Minister continuing to shoot this breeze? Why is he the loudest voice in all of Europe demanding to put our young men in harm's way for little Zelensky? And for what side of a line? Slaviansk. Do you know it well, viewer? Or Kupiansk? Very important to you, viewer, should lie at the end when it comes of this conflict. Well, it might be because Keir Starmer is currently at 13% in the approval rating, the lowest approval rating ever recorded since records began. It could be because he's the most hated Prime Minister that Britain has ever had. More than Thatcher, more than Blair, the most hated ever Prime Minister. Donald Trump said that everybody likes him. He's doing a great job. Well, he can't really have meant that. It would either be a sign of cognitive decline or it would be a breathtaking act of sarcasm. But that might be why Keir Starmer's doing it. Or maybe he's worried about this oddly long-delayed trial of the Ukrainian rent boys that set fire to property belonging him. Maybe he senses that this is an existential matter for him. Maybe he senses that, having kicked the trial so far down the path it can barely be seen on the horizon, that when it eventually has to happen, unless something happens to the Ukrainian rent boys in between, that he has to pull the mother of all diversions out of his hat. Or it could just be that the British hatred of Russia has so consumed Whitehall, the Foreign Office, the Ministry of Defence, the deep state agencies so consumed them that they are genuinely desperate to get into a firefight with the Russian Federation. But I don't need to stick only to Britain. I mean, is Macron's army going to fight the Russians? Going to fight them better than they fought the Nazis in 1940? Took Hitler 46 days to completely conquer France. Took Hitler less than 4 days, I've checked. 82 hours, to be precise, to conquer Mark Rutte's country's army of the Netherlands. Hitler was dancing on the Trocadero within 46 days. Have the French become very much more martial a race in the years since 1940? Well, they've killed a lot of tribesmen. They've killed a lot of African subjects in their colonial empire. They've killed a lot of people in sandals with Kalashnikovs in what they used to call French Indochina, but it's my guess that they would not fare well in World War III, in the great European war that their current posturing is literally inviting onto our path. I could say much more about the Europeans, but I've only got 2 minutes to say something about Trump. President Trump, I'm willing to believe that you're playing some 5D chess. I'm willing to believe that you're much cleverer than me. I'm willing to believe that all this willing like a dervish is just to confuse everybody, and that you actually do have an idea of what it is you're trying to achieve. But I have my doubts. And so they do in Moscow. You cannot say one thing to Vladimir Putin, and then when the seven dwarfs sit on you, assume the shape that they have left upon you. You cannot tell the dwarves that Russia is cool with European armies entering the theater of war in Ukraine, when you already know that Russia has told you that that red line they will not allow anybody to cross. Any NATO army, however badged, however flagged, will be the cause of all-out war between Russia and the country in question. You know this. President Putin told you this. It wasn't lost in translation. You know it. But in telling the European leaders something diametrically different, you are risking the peace of the world. Never mind the Nobel Peace Prize. Stay tuned, we've got Max Blumenthal, the sage of Washington, D.C., up next. Stay tuned.
What a great show this is! I listened to it, I thought, wow, what a great show. I've called into your show today, George, because I'm a great caller. Probably the greatest caller you've ever had. I really am. The only way your show could be better is if it had more of me, Donald J. Trump, in it. You keep talking about me, George. You do. I've heard it, I have. So many of the American people, the best people, listen to your show. And I've heard them crying about me. I have, and I listen and I go, ooh, America, don't cry. Don't cry. You need to be careful what you say about me, George. You don't want me to put a tariff on your show like I did with China. And then you'll come running for my help, just like little Zelensky. You know, I know you will. I know these things. Make the mother of all talk shows great again. That's why we're here. That's what we're gonna do, George. We're gonna boost your ratings. Donald is gonna boost them bigly. I'm giving your show the Trump bump. You're welcome, George. Thank me. And remember, nobody talks like me, nobody calls like me, and absolutely nobody ends a phone call like me. I'm hanging up now, not because I finished, but because I won.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, here's the poll. Has Trump ditched Zelensky? 20,000 people have voted, but the result is very close. In fact, too close to call. So if you have a point of view on that, you better get voting now. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my X, you can vote on the YouTube community poll, or you can vote on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to give a thumbs up to the show and to tell all your friends and contacts that we are broadcasting right now live at the highest level. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Max Blumenthal is the oracle in the United States. The Grayzone is the must-read and watch every single day. He's an author, he's a journalist, and he's an editor at the Grayzone News. Max Blumenthal, welcome back. Been a few weeks since we saw you, but what a few weeks they have been. Your take, first of all, on the ignominious parade of the seven dwarfs. But these seven dwarfs seem to have some impact on Trump's rhetoric, at least, if not his intentions. What do you think it all meant?
Well, they were first the seven babysitters to prevent another embarrassment for Zelensky. They referred to themselves as the coalition of the willing, which is the derisive term for what was essentially the coalition of the billing, all of the vassal states that the George W. Bush administration bought off to join the invasion and assault on Iraq, which France did not participate in. And now they've accepted this. And what they're seeking to do is inject a poison pill into the negotiations and take Trump along with them. And they're using some kind of demand for an Article 5 type security guarantee for Ukraine in the event of any settlement, which would mean the continued NATOification of Ukraine, even if it is formally blocked from NATO accession. And it would then take on the role of a kind of Taiwan, a continued porcupine state, with some territorial concessions that would allow NATO troops to operate on its territory. And I think it set the stage for another conflict. And at the same time, Trump has refused in Alaska, any talk about further economic cooperation and sanctions relief for Russia. So there doesn't seem to be any carrot to entice Russia into accepting that stick. But the Europeans, their main role is, and they're not just the Europeans, the role that they're taking on is also representative of the transatlantic faction in the Beltway foreign policy establishment, the Democrats, the Jake Sullivans, the Blinkens, these figures. Their role is to steer Trump towards increasing pressure on Russia rather than moving toward an actual settlement in the name of supposedly stopping the killing. And so I think, given the progress Russia's making on the ground, I think this is going to continue for some time, the war, that is.
What was all the bonhomie Alaska for then? Is it all to take our minds off the Epstein affair, take our minds off the Gaza genocide? I mean, what was the point of meeting and appearing to find important common ground with the Kremlin when it's plain, as you've just described, the basis for a settlement simply doesn't exist? I mean, quite the contrary.
Well, there are different factions in the Trump administration. I mean, you had Keith Kellogg, the liaison to the envoy to Ukraine, who's been clearly on the neocon side, Lindsey Graham, who golfed with Trump just before the summit. Then you have the Vance faction, J.D. Vance, Elbridge Colby below him, a lot of figures in the NSC who really want to see a settlement in Ukraine. I think they genuinely want to stop the killing, but there are also imperialist priorities there. They do not see the U.S. as, they're not interested in the U.S. getting bogged down in Europe. They're also less interested in the U.S. getting involved in a conflict for Israel with Iran because their eyes are on the real prize, which is China, Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, the real conflict looming on the horizon, which is right now an economic competition but could turn into a hot war, and they want to prepare all the U.S. vassal states that have encircled China, the Philippines and Japan, which recently have engaged in sort of bilateral military ties we've never seen before, to be the front line of war against China. So that I think there are competing factions in the Trump administration, and to the extent that the Vance faction can win out, Trump is going to have to some extent, decouple from Europe. The Europeans cannot do without a continued conflict in Ukraine because it will cement not only their own irrelevancy, but the irrelevancy of NATO in the North Atlantic. And they can't have that. That's why Mark Rutte was front and center among the seven dwarfs.
It would be entirely understandable, indeed, from my point of view, entirely welcome, if Trump said to them, well, we're out of here. If you want to continue this war, you'll have to do it yourselves with your own money, with your own men, and your own ships and materiel. That would then allow the European public opinion to bring itself to bear on the seven dwarves that lead them and say, well, we're not actually sure we want to do that. But Trump seems to be half in, half out to me. He, at one and the same time, is treating them in quite a derisive way, but accepting, if you like, or conceding their key demand, namely that they can still dream of this Article 5-like security guarantee, because you well know anything that's Article 5-like is NATO membership, even if they don't get to wear the badge.
Yeah, I mean, this requires some level of personal commitment from Trump to see through. And he said, there will be no NATO for Ukraine. Ukraine was never going to be allowed to accede to NATO. It never was. It was just dangled before Ukraine so that they would fight this war to weaken Russia on behalf of their puppet masters, and as along with EU membership. And then you have no U.S. troops on the ground, no U.S. boots on the ground. Keir Starmer has said he would have boots on the ground and planes in the air, and then just a week ago he said he wouldn't. Can the UK even defend itself against a band of mercenaries like the kind that tried to topple the government in Venezuela a few years ago? I mean, at this point, what even exists of the UK military? Can the EU actually defend Ukraine against a deeper Russian push? Can NATO defend it? I mean, it would certainly be disastrous for the continent, but I don't know. It would ultimately come down to the U.S. putting boots on the ground and the U.S. getting involved. And Trump needs to really decide, is he going to go with Europe, or is he going to give a carrot to the Kremlin to actually be able to make a deal And it's going to be painful for Ukraine either way because of the military situation. We need to also zero in on the situation on the ground around Pokrovsk, which is a key hub that cuts into the northern Donetsk fortified cities that are the heart of Ukraine's defensive doctrine. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk. If Russia gets past these cities militarily, and it's making progress, and Ukraine has had to send in much of the Azov regiment to patch holes in their defensive lines, and their drone defenses are not as effective as they were. If they're able to do that, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much a wrap for the Ukrainian military, because beyond there are no fortifications. The terrain becomes much more amenable to a Russian push. And that's why Putin is asking for that territory in a deal in exchange for freezing the lines around Zaporozhye and Kherson. And so you're getting this total resistance from Ukraine and the Europeans, and they're trying to inject a series of poison pills. But Trump, if he wants a deal, he's going to have to accept the military reality on the ground before it gets even worse for Ukraine.
The Belarusians are threatening to enter the conflict if Zelensky does not accept the proposal that Russia and Donald Trump, he says, have made to Zelensky. We've not yet seen exactly what that proposal looks like, but Zelensky surely does know it, and the Belarusians know it, and they are very close to Kiev. Geographically, of course. If the Belarusian army were to move into the conflict, they'd be in Kiev in a day and a half.
Well, we saw at the beginning of the so-called special military operation, Russia sent what was effectively an expeditionary force into Ukraine. It was like 80,000 soldiers. And what you really needed, if Russia was actually intending to take Kiev, and was a force of about 250,000. It was essentially trying to force Zelensky back to the table at the point of a gun. It was supposed to lead to some kind of deal in Istanbul that would end the process of NATOification, lead towards maybe neutrality in Ukraine. It failed because Boris Johnson parachuted in, convinced Zelensky to sabotage, to give up on the Istanbul deal and take massive shipments of offensive weapons. The Javelin missile systems proved pivotal in doing great damage to Russian armor in the Kiev Oblast, and they were pushed back. And Ukraine's military, they're a very, very effective military, but we're not at that point now. We're almost 3 years down the line. Ukraine's military has been attrited to the point where they're basically bringing in third stringers who cannot fight in close combat, who do not want to fight. The Ukrainian society, according to a recent Gallup poll, has completely flipped on the issue of continuing the war. Only 25% of Ukrainians actually want to continue this war. I think most of them are working for think tanks on K Street in Washington. Over 70%, close to 70% want a ceasefire. There isn't a kind of army that can repel another Russian push. And if you bring Belarus into the picture, the manpower problem that Ukraine faces will be further exploited. So this is a negotiating leverage for the Kremlin. And, I hope we don't have to see that. I hope there's a deal before then, particularly for the Ukrainians.
Now, Max, you mentioned the factions in the American government. Are there factions in the Russian government? Because of language and other difficulties, we never quite see, but somehow sense that there is a body within the power circles in Russia that long believed that Putin was too naive, as he said himself he had been, that Putin was prosecuting the war with too soft velvet gloves, and that these kind of negotiations, we've had Alaska, are we ever going to see a second round of talks? Is Budapest going to happen? Other factions fighting inside Russia, do you think, over minimalist and maximalist positions?
Well, I think I'm in safer territory when I talk about factions in Washington, where I live, and I'm getting further outside my field of knowledge when I talk about factions in Russia. But for sure, the faction that has won out at this point would be, in a sort of Western sense, the more hardline faction. I mentioned the defeat in the Kiev Oblast that Russia suffered in the beginning. The initial defeat in Kherson, where it wasn't even the Russian military, it was like a collection of Russian SWAT team members who had to flee across the Dnipro River. And, they've recovered there. And Putin subsequently replaced his defense minister, many of the higher commanders, and has kind of accepted the reality that there's not anyone to talk to on the other side. And if they're going to bring Kiev to the table, it's going to be with serious force. And that is why this summit took place. The summit took place because of Russian military victories and the weakened state of the Ukrainian military, the demoralized state of Ukrainian society, their lack of appetite to fight, the fact that young, teenagers are resisting Ukrainian press gangs to take them into the slaughterhouse, and the vision, the longer-term imperialist vision of a faction inside the Trump administration. So the material outcome of the summit in Alaska is very difficult to assess. It doesn't appear that Putin got what he wanted. For example, economic cooperation discussions about ballistic missile treaties, which would be great for humanity. But he did get a seat at the table, and this has been something that the transatlantic faction and the Europeans have been trying to prevent, just seeking to prevent Russia from ever having a seat at the table in negotiations. And so that in itself was a huge victory for Putin, as well as Putin and Trump coming together on U.S. territory. One of the main reasons, as Stephen F. Cohen explained, the late, great Stephen F. Cohen, for the concoction of the Russiagate conspiracy theory was to criminalize diplomacy, and he called it Intelligence Gate. And I think we finally moved into another phase where, for example, in The Guardian today, if you read an analysis by Luke Harding, who was seminal in disseminating the Russiagate hoax, wrote a whole book called Collusion, but never demonstrated collusion in it, walked out of an interview with Aaron Mate where he asked him to back up his thesis. He's written an analysis on why Trump and Putin met and why their relationship is improving seemingly. And at no point did he even attempt to claim that Putin was somehow manipulating Trump through some payment. He's just forgotten about the whole Russiagate narrative. So I think we're at least in a better place politically and historically, but the preponderance of neocon power on Donald Trump, as well as the Europeans, has obstructed any material progress so far.
Max, if you've got the time for me, I've got one last question, and it's a segue, not easily made, but one that is occupying a lot of interest over here. This bizarre story in Las Vegas, where a big tech guy who apparently is the IT chief of Benjamin Netanyahu was caught in a police sting trying to have sex with children. And the others were all booked and given a court date, but the Israeli guy pleading in aid, his connections to the FBI and the NSA and the CIA, was allowed to walk predictably all the way back to the safe haven of Israel. What on earth is going on with that?
Well, I wish we could have dedicated the whole show to that, because it's such a wild scandal. It feels almost like Epstein 2.0. Tom Alexandrovich is a key figure in Israel's cyber intelligence directorate, which is maintained by the office of Benjamin Netanyahu. His name was unknown to the public until he was booked in Las Vegas. He had, according to the Jerusalem Post, received an award last year for participating in the assassination of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah through some technological innovation. Wow. So he's an important Israeli cyber spy, and he got caught up in a sting, a federal multi-agency sting, in which an agent posed as a 15-year-old girl and asked him through a dating app called Pure to take him to take her to Cirque du Soleil and bring a condom, essentially saying, we're going to have sex and I'm underage. And he agreed, and they arrested him. 5 other men were arrested as well. In his interview, Alexandrovich revealed that he was in Las Vegas to attend the Black Hat cyber security conference. He was meeting with FBI agents there, meeting with NSA officials, and he had more meetings set up. And he said that he was desperate to get back to Israel and was deeply embarrassed and couldn't stop thinking about his family there. So he said, in no uncertain terms, that he was a flight risk, yet his passport was never surrendered and he was allowed to flee. The State Department issues a very unusual statement declaring that it had no role in helping him abscond from the country. And then we learn that the U.S. attorney in charge of Las Vegas and Nevada is an Israeli citizen named Sigal Chattah, who is a fanatical anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim racist who is installed as an acting U.S. attorney by Donald Trump because of her lack of qualifications. She would have never survived a confirmation hearing. 100 judges and lawyers have issued a letter declaring that she's unqualified. 2 days ago, this is totally unprecedented for a U.S. attorney, she deleted her entire personal Twitter account, ostensibly because it was so infested with anti-Palestinian genocidal rants calling for the slaughter of everyone in Gaza. She called for her opponent in the 2021 Attorney General's race to be hanged and compared him to a member of Hamas, and he happened to be a black man. And she campaigned during that race as an Israeli. Her campaign ad was actually called Israeli Born. And now she's on the defensive and is struggling to explain how she let this top Israeli cyber spy flee the US. No one else was allowed to flee who was caught up in that dragnet. And she's blaming liberal local prosecutors. So we have a real scandal on our hands, but it speaks to a larger phenomenon in which the Trump administration has adopted a kind of 2-tiered system of justice, of crime and punishment, where not just the powerful and the wealthy, but, for example, Zionist Jewish college students or Israelis like Tom Alexandrovich seem to be given carte blanche to do whatever they want, while the political enemies of Trump, whether they're Venezuelan door dashers or Palestine solidarity demonstrators, are brutalized, criminalized, and humiliated in the streets.
Well, a cloud no bigger than a man's hand can be a harbinger of a great storm to come. As soon as I saw this Vegas story, I thought immediately of Epstein. I made the point actually on Twitter that Trump needs this like a hole in the head. Does this scandal have any room to grow, or will it just peter out?
It has a lot of room to grow because it's sort of like the Epstein files. And the Epstein files are, everyone is talking about it still because Trump promised that they'd be released, did not release them, and then got every member of every Republican member of Congress to leave early for the summer recess to avoid voting on a Thomas Massey Ro Khanna bipartisan bill that would have called for them to be released. So they all leave early. And then what is the next thing that Trump does? He orders a federal invasion, military invasion of Washington, D.C. This is the distraction. And what are they doing? They're roughing up, immigrants delivering food and humiliating people in the streets. No one wants them here. It's a complete distraction. And there are protests growing in the streets. And if you just take a close look at those protests, every other sign is about Jeffrey Epstein. And then this other scandal emerges with an Israeli U.S. attorney letting an Israeli abscond who's a pedo spy. We still haven't gotten a sufficient explanation about how this happened, and it may go to the top. Why do I think it goes to the top? Because who controls Las Vegas? Who owns the biggest casino in Las Vegas? Who's the biggest donor to Donald Trump? One of the biggest donors in U.S. political history, who also happens to be one of the biggest donors to Benjamin Netanyahu. It's Miriam Adelson, owner of Sands Casino, Sands Las Vegas. Her husband, late husband Sheldon Adelson, owned that. And they fund the Israel-American Council, of which Sigal Chattah, the U.S. attorney, is a member. So is there an Adelson connection? Because I know for a fact that Miriam Adelson has gotten on the phone with Donald Trump and basically told him what to do on many occasions. Just yesterday, Donald Trump was on the Mark Levin show, this Likudnik carnival-barking radio host, praising Benjamin Netanyahu as a war hero. Do you think Trump really sees Netanyahu as a war hero? No, he's just following the script that's been given him to him by Adelson. So I think Netanyahu called his own network in the United States in to get one of his top cyber spies out of the country. And this is a scandal that goes to the top.
Well, the wheel's still in spin. Look forward to seeing where it all lands. Thanks very much, Max Blumenthal, author, journalist, editor at the peerless Grayzone News. Thanks for joining us. Let me take a quick break, 5 minutes late, and then it's your calls right up to the break. Stay tuned. Big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm really going to make this point as firmly as I can. Every one of you has to go to MOATS.tv and donate something, even if it is £1, even if it is $1, €1. Nothing comes for free. 2 shows a week cannot be produced for free. We need every person watching to donate at least £1, $1, €1. I can't put it more clearly than that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, the poll is still really close. Has Trump ditched Zelensky? On Telegram, 59% say yes. On X, 63% say yes. On the YouTube community poll, that's a leap, 71% say yes. And on the YouTube stream, 65 say yes. But the no numbers are not small. On Telegram, 41% say no, he has not. On X, 37%. On the YouTube community poll, 29%. And on the YouTube stream, 35%. So a much closer poll than normal. If you've got a point of view, make sure you record it on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Terry in England, in Chelmsford, is first up for this Wednesday, mother of all talk shows. Terry, welcome.
Hello, George.
Hi.
I'm very honoured to get the privilege to ask you a question. Have attempted before, but obviously it's my first time, so bear with me.
Okay.
Huge fan of you and your show, and you're one of the very few politicians that I would trust in this day and age.
Thank you, mate.
So, going away from what you've been talking about on the show, I just wanted to know a little bit more about more domestic issues. So, immigration is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it, but it has to be controlled. And I was wondering, if you was Prime Minister, what your plan would be to stop the illegal immigration coming over the channel.
Well, of course, immigration and illegal immigration are two different things, and asylum seekers, refugees, are a third different things. Our general attitude is that we are opposed to mass immigration. We believe that it's not in the interests of the country from which the immigrants are coming, and is being driven by the unequal way in which the world's resources and wealth are distributed. People who could and should build up their own countries are impelled by economic and sometimes other considerations to emigrate to a place like the United Kingdom. So that's one reason we're against it, for reasons of global equity, but also as a workers' party, as a party of shop stewards for the British working class, if you like. We're against it because it is not good for the existing population of Britain, and in particular the existing working class population in Britain. I, once upon a time, was a trade union negotiator in my factory in Michelin tires in Dundee, and if the manager had been able to say there are 20,000 people outside willing to work for less than you are demanding, that would certainly not have done my negotiating hand any good. But it's not just about wages, not just about conditions. It's about the availability of housing, it's about the availability of school places, it's about the availability of doctors' appointments and hospital treatments and dental appointments and so on. Plainly, the more people that come in, the more under pressure public services are. So our stance is we are opposed to mass immigration. Now, you were quite right to say right at the beginning that it's not quite as simple as that, because some immigration is necessary. There are plums lying unpicked in the fields at the moment because there's no labour available to pick them. In a country called Scotland, my own country, our population has just risen for the very first time in history to 5.5 million. That's 5.5 million people in a territory the size of England. Scotland, and it's only risen because of immigration. Scotland needs immigration because our birth rate is low. The number of people leaving Scotland was high. It's less high now. But the net effect is that we require people to move from other parts of the United Kingdom or from further afield. Some immigration is necessary for specialist jobs. I couldn't make a chicken vindaloo that would pass muster in a Bengali restaurant in Brick Lane. You need to bring sometimes a chef from Bangladesh to do that. And there are other specialist jobs that will require immigrant permits to come in. But the overarching guide should be what is in the best interest, not just of the British economy, that's a major part of it, but British society, British community. And when I say British, of course, I'm talking about all the people who are lawfully here in Britain, whatever colour they are, whatever religion they are, even whatever direction in which they pray. All of these things are completely immaterial to us. As the Workers' Party of Britain, we stand for all workers in Britain, and for those now too old to work, and for the children currently too young to work. These are our priorities. And as a Workers' Party, and as a Workers' Party in Britain, we have to be clear about that. there are people, very rich people usually, or very politically extreme left people, who would like open borders, who would like anybody at all in the world who wanted to come here to be able to do so. But that's just not common sense. And common sense socialism is what we stand for. The issue of illegal immigration is much more simple. Nobody, no state, absolutely no state, neither China nor Russia, nor the United States or Britain, can afford to allow people they don't know to be inside their borders, because they could be anybody. So illegal immigration must be stopped. And where people are found to have illegally entered the territory, they should be removed as quickly as possible. But the third category is refugees. Now, this is where I'm maybe going to disappoint you, Terry. Every country has a duty to take its fair share of refugees. And some countries, like Greece, like Italy, like Germany, like Lebanon, like Jordan, have taken vastly more than their fair share of refugees. These refugees are oftentimes fleeing from wars that we in Britain and in the United States and some other European countries launched against their countries without ever giving a moment's thought to what would happen to the people who began to flee from the wars that we were launching. This is untenable. We all have a duty to take our fair share of refugees. Now, they don't have to be put up in 3- or 4-star hotels. We don't have to fill the pockets of unscrupulous owners of so-called immigrant hotels who are charging the state £220 per night per refugee for potentially years to come. That's not a tenable solution. And so that will have to be dealt with. And I've made it very clear. When I see that Keir Starmer said he was going to smash the gangs, how come they're still operating on the other side of the channel? These big dinghies that poor refugees are risking their lives coming across the channel on, what happens to those big dinghies when they wash up on the south coast of England? Does somebody put a big spike through them and bust them? No! They send them back to France, where they can be recycled into bringing, at several thousand euros per person, bringing the next wave of people across the channel. As far as I'm concerned, the French are taking the piss out of the UK government. We have given France billions, and yet France is very clearly, if you'll forgive the mixed metaphor, turning a Nelson's eye to the people making a fortune as people traffickers on the beaches on the other side of the channel. Long answer, but it was an important question, Terry. I hope that it satisfied you. Comments now. You can send comments on YouTube by scanning the QR code that's in the corner. There it is there in the corner of the screen. And I'll read them out. Ian McKillop says, Trump went into the talks demanding a ceasefire and came out wanting a peace deal. Because Putin says, no ceasefire. You'll just use the time to rearm Ukraine, like every other time. Putin is learning. And Snakes 301271 says, America started the war, so Trump can't ditch Ukraine. And Lourdes Lopez says, Trump repeating what the US has always done, destroying countries for their resources, even attacking innocent people in Gaza. And Berry69Z says, the alleged breach of the Ukrainian General Staff's database reveals catastrophic losses of the armed forces of Ukraine. If true, it can't last much longer. This is an alleged breach of the Ukrainian General Staff database, which showed 1.7 million Ukrainian soldiers were either dead or missing. Jolly Lollipop 1 says Epstein kerfuffle and the Alaska summit is purely to deflect from the Gaza genocide. US citizens are anti-Israel and anti-genocide, but the crooked politicians are still taking bribes from AIPAC. Let me squeeze in a quick call from our good friend Declan in Dublin on Venezuela. Declan, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it's really about this punk Trump in the White House who thinks he's in a John Wayne movie set in the West where he can put a bounty on somebody's head and round up a posse to go after the black hat. You're wearing a black hat yourself, incidentally. Maduro in this case, right? Now, Venezuela has diplomatic relations with 178 countries, which is only slightly less than the United States. The United States, since the Monroe Doctrine, has been a curse on the whole of Latin America, including the pieces that they robbed. Trump was going on about the Panama Canal and all the Americans from the USA who died building it. In fact, 95% of the people who died building the Panama Canal were from Barbados, right? So he has this myth, and he's living in a John Wayne world. And the problem with Latin America and everywhere else is that, in the case of Latin America, the leaders, the civil society, like the Pope, they won't get together and tell Trump and America and all their little dwarfs in Europe to get the hell off their backs. That's it.
Absolutely. And as I pointed out, Declan, Venezuela has hundreds of thousands of people under arms, maybe millions, but hundreds of thousands of people under arms that would really love to have a fight with the American Marines, just 4,000 of them wading ashore. And of course, Venezuela has relations with all these countries around the world, but it has special relations with the Russian Federation, with the People's Republic of China, and with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Don't do it, Donny, you fool. Now look, just before the break, a drum roll for this week's biggest donors to the MOATS.tv website. Every penny and every cent counts. Ian McCavney, Dennis Freeman, Clinton Scott, Andre Danforth, and be like James Glass, who makes it onto the Wall of Fame again this week for his regular, very generous weekly donation. Thank you, James. Thank you to all of you. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight. Basically, there are two ways that you can support the show. Either, it's the simplest way, go to MOATS.tv, the website, and it's as easy as pie to leave a donation. It can be big or it can be small. It can be recurring or it can be one-off. But please do it. Or you can support me on patreon.com/George Galloway. After the break, Dr. Sabreena Ghaffar-Siddiqui, an activist and a former sociology and criminology professor, ousted, like so many others, for her outspoken advocacy on Palestine. Don't go away. I'll be right back. There's a legend on the line in Oklahoma. It's May on Trump. Welcome back, May.
Trump is using a magic 8-ball to make his decisions. He apparently has completely lost whatever mind he had to begin with. This is just ridiculous. Does he really think anyone's going to believe that? I'm here to say, and I'm here to join you and everybody else, the emperor has no clothes on. He's as naked as they come. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he got naked with some young people. And that is why he so desperately is trying to kill this whole Epstein thing, and he's just making it worse.
I'm wondering when Donald Trump knew that he was implicated in these Epstein files and what it was that he knew. That's the big question, because he wouldn't have been banging the Epstein drum all this time and then suddenly to pull the rug. That tells me that it was a late decision, that someone came late to Trump to say, you know, you really don't want to be doing that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You've got 30 minutes to get your vote in. Has Trump ditched Zelensky? Yes or no? Vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Now, Dr. Sabreena Ghaffar-Siddiqui was a sociology and criminology professor ousted for her outspoken advocacy on Palestine. This is the kind of new McCarthyism that we have had to become wearily familiar with in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, and certainly in the United Kingdom. Dr. Sabreena, thank you for joining us. Please, for those not familiar with your case, explain to us what happened.
Hi, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I'm very thrilled to be here. In a nutshell, I mean, my story is not very different from others who have experienced the same kind of repression or, unfair dismissal because of their Palestine advocacy. I just spoke too much, shared too much. I was very active on social media. The interesting thing here, though, is that I have always been a very outspoken public academic. I've always been a public sociologist. In fact, I was hired because of that public advocacy. So, once I was glorified and there were articles written about me, about, how brave and bold I am. But then, as we have seen in other places, the Palestine exception jumped in. And as soon as I started to speak up about Palestine, I became a nuisance. Now, unlike other universities and colleges where they may have like some kind of, financial ties to Israel, with my college, I don't believe that, that was the main driving force for ousting me. I think there were two reasons. One, I became a nuisance because there were just too many complaints coming in. And once a complaint landed in the president's office directly, I was apparently bringing too much negative attention and too much kind of buzz to the college that they didn't want. And the other thing, I think the other reason why I was kicked out was that, I was behaving like a, quote unquote, uppity, racialized Muslim woman. I was challenging the administration. I was fighting back, and I wasn't happy with the crumbs that were thrown my way, all the praise and the, the position that I was given. I think the expectation was for me to kneel when they asked me to kneel, for me to shut up when they asked me to shut up. And I didn't do that. So they didn't want me in the institution because they couldn't control me any longer.
Is there a reason why you didn't name the college? Do you not want to name it? Would it not help us if we knew?
No, I have no reason not to. I mean, I am currently involved in a case. It's a union case, but I have named them on social media. It's Sheridan College in Canada. So no, there's no reason why I wouldn't name them.
I'm asking because some of these American universities, I saw an incredible story where I think it was $100 million or more had been set aside for students at Harvard University who'd been upset by the pro-Palestinian agitation on the campus. So here you are sacked from your job, whilst people who are supporters of the genocide against which you were protesting are being lavishly, fantastically lavishly rewarded as compensation. The North American continent is very definitely a tale of two cities, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a good time to maybe kind of explain the role of academics and intellectuals kind of, on the public stage and in the world. We often get told that we sit in ivory towers, we speak amongst ourselves, and that is true. But there are some of us who, are public sociologists, and we take that knowledge and we translate it into the community. And I think, the empire colonizes white supremacists. And, historically, we've seen this with, in other colonial spaces. The first injury is of writers, journalists, academics, because they hold a very powerful position. I mean, even if you look at the British Raj in India, one of the first spaces that was shut down, like in 1910 and 1930, policies were created that repressed the press. And, journalists and writers were seen as very dangerous because they created a rebellion of sorts, and a psychological rebellion is, in my opinion, not just the foundation of physical rebellions, but it is more powerful even than a physical rebellion. You have people who are turning on the system. And, one of the moments that for me were the most profound in the work that I do, it was very soon after I had been let go of my job. I was feeling very demoralized as an academic, and I sat down on my desk and I was like, okay, I'm going to write an article. I'm going to finish this article and get it published in a reputable journal. That way I can continue feeling like validated as an academic. And on that day, this thought came to my mind and I decided to tweet it. And that tweet within 24 hours had 9 million views. And the article that I may have written, probably wouldn't have been published for 18 months to 2 years. By the time these articles get published, people have moved on. The story is not center anymore, right? So for me, that was a very powerful moment that made me realize that the role of an academic is not just to sit in these ivory towers and to print in these, what is knowledge production? And this for me was decolonizing pedagogy. It was a moment for me to advocate for academics to kind of come out of those spaces and go into these public spaces, which are scary. I get a lot of hate, I get lots of negative attention as well, but the access that people have to my writing and, the knowledge that I'm sharing is far greater online.
For sure, it's a revolutionary tool, no doubt, warts and all. But the reasons that you were singled out and other academics like you have been singled out are the same reasons why Israel is systematically murdering academics, professionals, doctors, surgeons, hospital administrators, poets and writers, and artists and journalists and photographers that are all being singled out for murder and assassination for the same reason you have been, thank God, not physically but professionally assassinated. Is the union that's looking after your case confident? I mean, what conceivably would be the grounds for dismissing someone like you from speaking their mind?
So what's really interesting is that, they couldn't actually accuse me of anti-Semitism because in no way, shape or form has my work been anti-Semitic. So, what they decided to get me on was for going against the college's policy against basically on behaving in a civil and professional manner. So I was told that my tweets were not civil and professional, and that goes against college policy and protocol. So, this has been happening to a lot of people. It's not exactly, they know that they can't get you for anti-Semitism, so they make up another thing. They over surveil you, and they try to malign you and your character and your work in other ways, and in many ways to blacklist you. And the thing is that, I have been on these databases, canarymission, which started off, as a database for academics and students. And now it includes journalists, it includes, people from all walks of life. And we've been told that the canarymission is what is being used for ICE detention, for ICE, they use the canarymission to basically criminalize people and take people in. So that was the reason why I was, taken out of my role. And I believe other people are going through the exact same thing. I don't know what else to say, other than the fact that, charges of anti-Semitism,
what are the prospects? What are the prospects? Yeah, what are the prospects of the union winning your case?
Look, they told me right from the beginning that what I want is likely not going to happen. And, I'm looking for an apology. I'm looking for vindication. I'm looking for this to be a powerful case for the bigger picture, for other people who are speaking up on Palestine. And I was told that, likely what will happen is like a monetary compensation of sorts. And in order for that to happen, I was told that I should cool it on my advocacy and I should kind of keep a low profile until then. And this was told to me a year ago, which means I was expected for the last year to just be quiet. And that was something that I was just not willing to do.
Well, you couldn't get more high profile than being on this show tonight, which in the course of the week will be seen by many millions of people around the globe. So I'm grateful that we were able to showcase you. Lastly, though, Doctor, has it placed your immigration status in any doubt? I have some very bad experience with Canadian governments, you see, and I wondered if there was any possibility that your stay in Canada might be curtailed as a result of all this.
To be honest, I haven't even looked into any of that. I was born and raised in the UK. I have American citizenship, and, I've been living in Canada for the last 20 years. So it's not something of grave importance to me right now to look at. My focus has been on this genocide and advocating for it. I was listening to you speaking earlier to Max as well, and there was something that I wanted to kind of comment on, and this the blocking of children from Gaza who are amputees coming to the US, right? And comparing this to what we've seen with people from Ukraine, and how there's been an 81% approval rating in terms of applications just in Canada for people coming from Ukraine compared to 16% for Palestinians. And to give a analysis on this, what we're seeing constantly is the adultification of children and the infantilization of adults when it comes to Black and brown communities, governments. So this kind of dangling carrot that we will recognize Palestine as a state, but only if it's demilitarized, is this notion that we can't trust you to govern your country in a responsible way. So you cannot be trusted with military weapons. We can, but you can't. And then the adultification of children in the sense that, these children are seen as threats, as terrorists. And I don't know, George, if you've seen this video that's been going viral, I saw it yesterday, of this 2006 video of an Iraqi boy speaking to an American soldier. And in this video, he's asking this American soldier, why did you kill my father? Why did the Americans kill my father? And the soldier turns around, and one of the first questions the soldier asks is, do you hate America now? Do you want to shoot me? And that is the most pertinent thought that comes to this soldier's mind, is to victimize himself and to criminalize this child, almost in a way to justify the killing of children, because they will forever be seen as a threat if they are Arab or Muslim or coming from these communities. So, what we're seeing in terms of the response to Ukraine versus the response to Palestine, I mean, journalists slipped up back then, when the war first broke out. And I don't know if you remember when US journalists said, I mean, this is different. These are people with blonde hair and blue eyes. And, that was such a telling moment in media where we could see journalists admitting that the empathy that they feel for Ukrainians has so much to do with the white supremacy that's embedded in our institutions, where Black and brown bodies are not seen as valuable. Which is why we're seeing such high numbers without any actual policy change in any of the countries, any foreign policy measures that would end this genocide, just fluff talk.
Wow, very powerful indeed. Dr. Sabreena, we wish you all the best with your case and with your advocacy. Something tells me that a low profile and you are completely mutually contradictory, and I look forward to seeing and reading far more from you in the future. I hope you'll come back on the show. Dr. Sabreena Ghaffar-Siddiqui, activist and former sociology and criminology professor, ousted for her advocacy on Palestine. Let me take a quick break, and then it's your calls right up to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned. A big thanks to the people who support me on the Patreon page. I really have come to depend on the income from that. It costs £1 a week, not even the price of a cup of coffee in an insalubrious cafe. If you think you could stretch to that, please support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, the MOATS team have added a tiered system on my Patreon page where you can become an official MOATS graduate. How about that? I speak as someone who graduated from nowhere, from the factory floor in Michelin. But you can become a MOATS graduate and legend. You can give a regular donation to support the show and my work. You can now upgrade from a mere Patreon to a MOATS graduate at £10 a month, as opposed to £5 a month, I think it is. And you can receive official MOATS legend status for £20.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Has Trump ditched Zelensky, yes or no? You've got 14 minutes left to vote, and it's actually tightening a little bit. Has Trump ditched Zelensky? My answer would be no, to be perfectly frank, but I can see why there's a big number of people voting that way. Look, on the line is my old friend from Birmingham, England, DJ Scorpion, on another Palestine demo. Tell me, DJ, what's happening?
Assalamu alaikum. George, how are you today? You okay?
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah barakatuh. Very nice to hear from you again. We had a very fine day, very hot day earlier this summer in Birmingham. Have you got another one coming up now?
Yes, we have. Firstly, we would like to thank you for coming down on behalf of the team and myself and people from Birmingham, everybody. Thank you very much for coming down that day. It's a very, very momentous occasion. And the action we took, we closed down the BBC, as you saw, for a number of hours. Yes, we're back again, as you know. Yeah. We've got a demonstration coming up on this Saturday, the 23rd of August, at Handsworth Park for 2:30 p.m. We shall be assembling at 1:30 p.m. Then marching to BBC studios.
Very good, very good. Saturday, the 23rd of August, 2:30 p.m. At the park, leaving from the park and heading for the BBC. First class. I look forward to hearing all about it. Can't be there myself, but very grateful for your teeing it up. Thanks, DJ Scorpion. Now, it's just $1 or £1 to get yourself onto our wall of fame, like tonight's top donors who've been onto the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Dawn Elliott, Stuart Nimmo, James Preston, Motaz Salah, and a big thank you to Po Tam, who makes a weekly donation to MOATS. Thank you very much. Please check out our new MOATS.tv website and give what you can. If you can give a little, give it. If you can give more, give it. But you have to give something. Adnan is on the line in England from Stoke, but on Palestine. Adnan, welcome. What would you like to say?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'm a really big fan of you, and I listen to your speeches, in Oxford Union, and they're really amazing on the Iraq War, on Zionism, on Palestine liberation, which is all amazing. So
thank you, bro.
I'd just like to say about Palestine, it's been really awful what's been going on for 2 years, the genocide, and I think what's the most awful thing is the Western media is still having debates on these big debate shows about whether it is genocide or whether it isn't. And it's really obvious what the answer is. Because if it was, I don't know if I can say this, if it was the other way around, then they would be all be screaming genocide because unfortunately it's not anti-Semitic because it is a Jewish nation, but just the history, if you learn all about it, then you know what's happening is not right. So I'd just like to ask you if...
No, it's not right. Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
Are the Palestinians, civilians, like the biggest threat according to the Western media? Hope you understand the question.
I do, and they're not, and everyone knows they're not a threat. These little children that Dr. Siddiqui mentioned a minute ago, who are being denied visas to go to the American hospitals that charities have paid for, are amputees. These are children whose legs have been blown off, whose arms have been blown off. In one case, whose arms and legs have been blown off. How could they be a danger to anybody? They're only a danger because they are a graphic, obscenely graphic representation of what America and Britain and other Western countries have done to these little children. They are a mark of shame on the governments of the West. So they don't want to give them visas, because if they are allowed into American hospitals, someone will take a picture of them. Someone will try to write up their story, and it will be clear to yet more people than it already is just the murderous role that Western governments have played in all of this. Without them, none of this could have happened. Netanyahu alone, the Israeli state alone, could not remotely have done what they have done to the Palestinian people, not just for 2 years, but for 78 years, if it were not for the never-ending, bottomless support that they are given by Western governments. And it's very clear in the leaked audio of the former commander of the Israeli army, invasion army of Gaza, that they intend to take 50 for one. So for every Israeli who was lost, the Israeli invasion force intend to take 50 Palestinians, and that it doesn't matter, he said, whether they are men, women or children. It doesn't matter what age they are. Now this tariff of 50 to 1 is double the tariff that Heydrich himself imposed in the Second World War in occupied Czechoslovakia. His tariff was 25 to 1. If you killed a German soldier, then 25 of you had to die. Israel has doubled that tariff. Kind of bizarre, obscene inflation. Adnan in Stoke in England on Palestine, thank you for the call. Now, did you know there was a MOATS podcast, a diluted version of each show every single week, the quintessential MOATS. You can download it by scanning the QR code on your screen now, and you can listen via the moats.tv website. So if you're in the car, for example, you could just listen to the MOATS podcast. And tonight, we are #1 for politics in Tunisia. Wow! We're still in the top 5 in Indonesia and Romania. Top 40 in Ireland, New Zealand and Italy this week. Once you've listened, please leave a review and rate it. It helps us to grow the podcast. Damien in Brighton wants to talk about Mearsheimer and Ukraine. Go ahead, Damien.
Good evening, George. Yes, I'd like to make a very brief point about Mearsheimer on Ukraine, and also a very brief point on Donald Trump, if I may. So my first point is... Thank you. Thanks, George. I appreciate that. So my first point is one which has been made by Professor John Mearsheimer, who is one of the world's most preeminent international relations experts. In his view, if Ukraine doesn't agree to Russia's current terms, it is going to be inevitable that Ukraine will lose more lives and more land. So by saying Zelensky should not agree to Russia's terms, Keir Starmer and the EU leaders are not helping Ukraine at all. They are encouraging them to worsen their position. And on Keir Starmer, George, Keir Starmer is still suggesting that the UK send British troops to Ukraine. And he originally suggested that 30,000 troops should be sent. He's since scaled that number down to 10,000. But it's a matter of fact that the UK has just 18,800 medically fully deployable combat troops. So if we were to send those troops to Ukraine, it would leave the UK with just 2 brigades to protect the entire UK. So it would effectively leave the UK defenceless, so as a non-starter. And very briefly on Donald Trump, the sign of a good leader is that they are people who spend their time and effort on issues that they can affect and change, and they don't waste their time on issues that they have no control over. And President Trump has no control over the outcome of the war in Ukraine, but he does have control over the genocide that Israel is committing against the Palestinians, and he could end the genocide with a single telephone call to Netanyahu, in which he could tell Netanyahu that if he doesn't immediately stop committing genocide against the Palestinians, America will withdraw all financial and military support to the country. So he could Trump could quite literally end the genocide of the Palestinians this evening.
What a brilliant call. Succinct and brilliant, eloquent and factually unassailable. That's Damien in Brighton. It's been with me for a very long time on the Mother of All Talk Shows, right back to the early Talk Sport days. Brilliantly put, Damien. I'm hoping that you again become a regular caller. Comments from Jack Plugman. Don't forget the IDF armed and trained the Central American death squads in the 1980s. Indeed so, Jack. Kay Shopper says, do you know anything about Wandering Emma Withers? She's from Scotland and mysteriously died in Scotland after visiting the West Bank, Palestine. I'm afraid I don't, but I'm interested to hear more. Hassan Jamil says, George, there was the biggest gathering of Arba'in in Karbala, Iraq, with over 20 million people coming from all over the world. No Western media reported it. in the main news. Thanks, Hassan. Of course, we expect nothing more or less. Texas grown 1978 sends $10 US. Thank you for that. Remember the soldiers, women and children who lost their lives from Iran, Yemen, Russia, Ukraine, any innocent in Israel. Sure, there are a few. And Syria, over 2 million dead. Bless you all. And Nikia says there's a tendency to paint Muslim women as oppressed and voiceless by the West. But when certain Muslim women advocate for human rights for Palestinians, they're shut down. Western values equals hypocrisy. Brilliantly put, and apposite for the wonderful Muslim woman guest we have just featured here on the Mother of All Talk Shows. More calls now. North Wales in the United Kingdom. Charlie on Starmer and Lammy. Oh, I can hardly bring myself to say their names. Chaz, what do you want to say about them?
George, thank you for taking my call. Likewise, those names send my skin cold and clammy, as usual. Because it's great guests on this evening's show. And your latter guest, Dr. Sabreena, she touched on what I want to talk about is foreign policy and the sort of the hypocrisy of it. These guys make village idiots everywhere look like candidates for Mensa. I don't know how we've ended up with them, but that's doing village idiots a disservice, I'm afraid. But I'm just wondering where Lammy gets his ideas from, because I hark back to a episode of Yes Minister that appeared in 1983, and it popped up on the television the other night, and it was spookily or depressingly fresh given our Middle East policy, foreign policy. And he even his pontifications remind me of Humphrey, trying to do down Jim Hacker. Well, this particular episode was actually taken down by the BBC because it was seen with anti-Israel bias. It was called A Victory for Democracy, where Jim Hacker wanted to cancel Trident and stop Israel bombing the PLO and vote against them in the UN. And Humphrey's explaining to the lobbyist, which I think dictates our foreign policy now. He said, we follow a four-stage strategy. And when the old officers asked what is that, he said the Foreign Office response in a time of crisis is: stage one, we say nothing is going to happen. Stage two, we say something may be going to happen, but we should do nothing about it. In stage three, we say that maybe we should do something about it, but then there's nothing we can do about it. And in stage four, we say, well, maybe there was something we could have done, but it's too late now. And he closes the statement by saying government is all about stability, not morality. And that statement is attributed by the scriptwriters to the foreign secretaries under Harold Wilson as a direct quote. And it's depressingly fresh. Wow. And I'm just wondering, these people have repeatedly lied in the House of Commons. They've repeatedly lied in the press and to the British people. And having had many decades in the House yourself, is there any redress we as the people can do to get these idiots out? Because they are dangerous. They are dangerous to the world.
No, just to vote them out. No, the only thing you could do is vote them out, Charlie. Brilliant call. And you took me off down memory lane. To Yes Minister, which, as you say, is chillingly apposite. The more you look at government, the more you look at Parliament. But no, you get the government you vote for. And if you don't vote, then you are by default going to end up with the members of Parliament who will support the likes of Starmer and Lammy to form a government. So Lammy is the MP for Tottenham. He has done nothing for the people of Tottenham. He had no case for being the Member of Parliament for Tottenham, whose previous Member of Parliament, the late and great Bernie Grant, was a good friend of mine, a great champion of the people. Lammy was a university boy from Oxford, with absolutely no connection to the lives of the ordinary people living in Tottenham. And they've been electing him ever since. Now, there may have been times when there wasn't the right kind of opposition, but we and others, we put up candidates in Tottenham, far better than David Lammy by any metric, and with no blood on their hands. But they still voted for David Lammy. So until we can change that, and before we change it, Charlie, we're going to have to properly appraise our strengths and our weakness. We can feel hegemonic on a show like this because the vast majority of people watching this show, texting it, calling in, agree with you and me on these matters. And there are millions of us, but it's a small number of millions. Lammy and Starmer are counting on the fact that the other, let's say 2.5 million people will watch this episode, and another 2.5 million watched the episode last Sunday. That's 5 million people, not all of them by any means in Britain. Let's say half of them were in Britain. 2.5 million are with us. But the population of Britain is almost 70 million now. So they count on the fact that a few millions, not that many, but a few millions, support the crimes that they are committing. But the vast majority of others know or care, but usually know nothing of which we speak. They know nothing about the issues that we are talking about tonight. So our task is to reach those millions. If I could, if I had the money to invest in doing it, I would have a crash advertising splash attracting people to the mother of all talk shows. But we don't have money to do that. Therefore, we can only grow incrementally by word of mouth, really, because the rest of the media doesn't even report the fact that we exist. So the fact that the millions that are watching is as a result of word of mouth, and that is, by definition, a slow process. Now look, we've got a No to NATO live event tomorrow. Trump's double header with Eddie Liger, Pat Walsh and Warren Thornton. It's live on my YouTube, my X, my Rumble and my Facebook channels from 9 p.m. London time. So please tune in to that. Will in California wants to talk about the Epstein files. Who wouldn't? Go ahead, Will.
George, thank you for taking my call. America loves you, by the way. But you know what? They don't back off. They just double down, don't they? I mean, we can't stop pressuring the Trump administration for the Epstein files and demand to see that which they don't want to be seen. It's a line in the sand for victims, but more about the protection of elite friends of friends, foreign espionage, weapons trafficking, and especially the money laundering. We're missing trillions of dollars over here, mostly through the Defense Department. Curiously, during the Epstein years, he undoubtedly held his clients hostage through blackmail and not only child exploitation, but through money laundering and espionage as well. So those of us over here have to keep our hands on the political steering wheel and make this our line in the sand, because everything else is just a distraction.
I agree with that, Will. It's a big mistake to consider that the Epstein affair is about sex and therefore it will pass. First of all, it wasn't about sex. It was about sexual exploitation of underage and vulnerable people by rich and powerful people, which is not a sex story, but a power and exploitation story. But it wasn't just about that. It was crucially about espionage, which means that the likelihood is, I'd say certainty, but logically you'd have to acknowledge that the likelihood was that the absolute domination of American governance by the Israel lobby is intimately tied to the activities of Jeffrey Epstein and other Jeffrey Epsteins that no doubt existed and still exist in various parts of the American polity. As I put it the other day, what except cash, and there's much more of that than is known, we focus, because that's all we can do, on the recorded amounts of money that was donated by AIPAC and by other pro-Israel donors, Adelson and the rest. But frankly, that's only the tip of the iceberg. That's the money they could not hide because it went through a bank, because there's a bank transaction involved. There's a paper trail that requires them to record it, to register it. But what about the suitcases full of actual cash that is delivered to these people? Suitcases that might not even be for the cause, but might be for them personally. If one of these lobbyists walks in with a briefcase and walks out without the briefcase, and there's $1 million in cash that's intended for the congressman or the senator in whose office it has been left, no one will ever know about that. But it very definitely happens, and it happens on both sides of the Atlantic. Davinder is in Leicester on US foreign policy. That's Leicester in England. Davinder, welcome. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, George. Thank you for taking the call. It's a bit convoluted, but a bit nervous, but let me just get if you allow me to just say my bit. So, starting off with Twin Towers. You can say it's a conspiracy theory, but just there is other truths or opinions out there. Now, they threw that down. The Middle East, they've always wanted to take all the oil. They don't want these brown people having control of the oil. So the only countries that could fight back were Iraq, Iran, and Libya. They've took them out. Now, the rest of the Saudi countries, they're just puppets. The only thing they worry about is sanctions, meaning that their visas get taken away and they can't travel. I'm on about the politicians, not the people. And so they can take them over whenever they want. They went for Russia, thinking that the full sanctions would work. It didn't quite work. They didn't cripple them, but they attacked Russia, thinking that they will attack Iran because Russia won't be able to fight on two fronts. Now, the Gaza situation, the attack on October the 7th, there is thoughts out there, which I think they're quite credible, that the Israelis knew for over 2 years that this attack was going to happen. And all their people, their army and all that were moved away from that border for it to take place. Now, they factored that in, that they'll take Gaza out. When they take that out, they'll go for Iran, with Russia not being able to help. And now, the Russia thing's still not happened, but by doing that, if their plan worked, they would take over all the oil, and Saudi Arabia, all these countries are not going to fight back. They're their puppets. They can easily do them. They're not Iran. They're not Yemen. All right, Yemen's the fighting force. They're my heroes, but they weren't going to, these countries and all that. They can take Kuwait. They can take UAE. They can take all that. By taking all that, they know that they can bring China's to their knees, because China needs energy. And then these little Chinese people will be working in the sweatshops, making all their stuff for them at minimum wage, and everything will be perfect. Now, mad as it sounds, but now with the Venezuela thing, I think, and the Ukraine thing, I think Venezuela, Trump has thought, they're sending these ships, etc. He's going to let the Europeans go in. If they want to go in, go in. He'll watch that at the same time, whether it happens or not. They'll go into Venezuela, try and do whatever they think they can do. They always think they can do more than they can, hence why they lose a lot. And if the Venezuela bit goes well, the Europeans in Ukraine, if they're doing well or whatever, America may let or turn away. The Europeans have got no choice because they're bust. Because if they don't do nothing, America's making deals with Russia. They're going to be better off. We're energy-wise, financially-wise, buggered. And if they don't, so hence why this is just the last throw of their dice. They need that war to go on and get some chips from the table. Not exactly how I wanted to say it, but
well, look, you warned us. You warned us at the beginning that it was a bit convoluted, and convoluted it was. But that doesn't mean it wasn't accurate. Everything that you said, in and of itself, was correct, and I commend you for the speed and lucidity with which you expressed it. The problem I have with that kind of worldview is that it seems to suggest that each moving part in that big mosaic that you described there has no agency themselves, that they themselves cannot act, cannot alter the course of events. And it also, I'll tell you candidly, someone who was in Parliament over 5 decades, from the 1980s until last year, that it presupposes that the people who are ruling us on this side of the ocean and on the other, and presumably across the channel, are James Bonds, but they're not. They are Mr. Beans. They are Austin Powers. They stumble from one cock-up to the next. And it seemed in your narrative to suggest that these people are like a smooth, well-oiled Rolls-Royce, and that they are bound to go forward, onwards and onwards. But they're not. They have lost. They invaded and destroyed Iraq, to be sure, but they were driven out of it. They have not been able to bring down Iran. They have not even been able to set foot in the Yemen, even though the Yemen is landing ballistic missiles, sometimes hypersonic ballistic missiles, down the chimney of Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, the national airport of Israel, virtually on a weekly basis, sometimes more often than once a week. Yemen is continuing to confound the missile defense system of Israel and making a mockery of the American Patriots and THAAD missile defenses. It seems to presuppose that Israel has won in Gaza, but it has not. This very day, a small group of Fedayeen took a terrible toll on the Israeli invaders in Gaza City, and that's by no means a rare event. Thousands of Israelis have been killed, wounded, or so psychologically damaged that they are not able to return to the fray. Israel is about to launch a recruitment campaign in America to try and get American youth to go to Israel and fight in Gaza because they don't have enough recruits or enough reservists who are turning up for their reserve duty. And that's before we even talk about Ukraine and what a terrific setback to NATO ambitions, the victory after victory of the Russian armed forces. And it's without even talking about China. Max had the view earlier that the Vance faction had their eye on the bigger prize, their eye on China, a coming war with China. Well, there may be a coming war with China, but if there is, China will win it. So one shouldn't allow the sewing together of all these different events and areas, as you very deftly did, and it's valuable, but we shouldn't allow that to lead us into thinking that their victory is inevitable and that our defeat, therefore, is inevitable. That's very far from the truth. But, sorry, Davinder, there's a legend in the room. It's my good wife Gayatri with the social media news roundup. What's happening, Gayatri?
You're right, they have not been able to bring down Iran, and they have been trying for a very long time, because on the 19th of August 1953, 72 years ago, was the first, let's say, CIA successful coup against the Mossadegh government, which is the democratically elected, very popular prime minister of Iran. But then he started to put his own people first, and then he started to nationalize key sectors like his oil, which initially was called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, nowadays known as BP. So when he started to nationalize that sector, of course the British were very unhappy, and in a now fully admitted, declassified documents and admittance from all kinds of heads from the CIA and the MI6, they were backed. This coup d'etat against Mossadegh was backed by the CIA and MI6, which put him into prison and then in house arrest until his death in '67, which brought forth the Shah, Shah Pavlova, I always call him, which proved impossible. And you know what? Last Sunday I was speaking about John Perkins, the economic hitman. He was warned about this, you know. When John Perkins went to Iran, they warned him about this Shah. He was not good, and the Iranian people were not happy with him, and that the Iranian revolution was on the horizon.
Was inevitable, yeah.
Yes, so that happened, and this is where we are today. 72 years later, they're still trying, and they're not successful.
Amazing. So I was on the 17th, did you say?
19th. So yesterday, 19th August.
So less than a year before I was born, Britain and the United States brought down the elected government of Iran, a government which was wildly popular for its foreign policy as well as its domestic policy. In so doing, they brought about the return of the greatest dictator in the region, the Shah of Shahs, King of Kings, who then built the most fearsome torture force, the SAVAK, which murdered and tortured hundreds of thousands of people over the next, what would that be then, 2.5 decades. And if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't brought Mossadegh down, there would have been no Shah. No Shah means no Ayatollah Khomeini. No Ayatollah Khomeini means no Iran-Iraq war. No Iran-Iraq war means no second Iran-Iraq war. No emergence of ISIS and Al-Qaeda across the region and spilling out, cascading around the world. We threw a small stone into the pond in overthrowing Mossadegh, and it became a tidal wave. Thanks for reminding us of that.
Our friend and previous guest of the show, Max Blumenthal, he actually visited these torture rooms in Iran. Pretty horrendous. He did. Yeah, you can look up his videos on the Grayzone. Now, today, Mo Farah appeared yet again at the Magistrate Court in London, this time with an Irish interpreter. Mo Farah is, of course, the Irish rapper from the hip-hop trio Kneecap from Belfast, and he has been accused of terror charge for displaying the Hezbollah flag at one of their gigs in London last year, in November last year.
Somebody actually handed it to him on stage, right?
Well, yes, and of course,
That's
again...
his first offence. Mo Farah, a bit of free legal advice. You had no idea what the flag was. Somebody just handed it to you from the crowd.
Yes, just a yellow flag to cheer things up. But so Mo Farah and their band and their representatives, they were greeted and supported by hundreds. I mean, it was almost 1,000 people outside. Good, it was fantastic. And yes, the book they tried to ban, Kneecap is up there. Mo Farah is loved more than ever. And a very interesting signpost was erected outside the magistrate's court saying, ethnic cleansing in Palestine, right there outside it, because
proper street sign,
proper
like it was a state street sign.
Officially placed. So after the three-hour trial, which resulted in his terror charge being delayed until next month, he addressed the crowd and he said, "We know this story is more than just about me and more than kneecap. This is a story about Palestine and us as a distraction from the real story." So
there was no verdict today?
No, still not.
Good luck, Mocara. Justice will prevail. I'm
yes.
absolutely sure. Gayatri, we're over time.
Yes.
Have you got anything you need to say?
No.
You can tell me over chips.
Yes.
It's Eve in Florida with the last call of the night about NATO. Go ahead, Eve.
Well, I would like to give an alternative view of the situation. About those vassals coming and Trump, as a kingmaker and the Snow White and all that. There is another explanation, is that NATO is being bought by the European. Europe wants to build an undemocratic, militaristic big power, and their army is going to be NATO. And that's the 5%. The 5% basically is they are buying NATO. I believe that the ground troop will be largely made with Turks. And Ukraine is being consumed. It's getting consumed right now for the building of Europe. And this is not the first time. If you remember, for instance, there are many cases, but you have Poland, for instance. Poland disappeared at some point because it was consumed for the making of the Prussian, Austrian, and Russian Empire. Same reason, the European empire, future empire, is consuming Ukraine. This is what I think this is an alternative view of the situation. And that's what I wanted to say.
Well, it's food for thought, no doubt. The fundamental problem with it is that the European continent is bankrupt. It is resource light. It has virtually no natural resources. It required an empire to feed it on sweetheart terms with the energy that it needed, with the minerals and with the wherewithal for an industrial life like Germany once had, like Britain once had, but shorn of that empire, and the days of European empire are long gone. There are still some hangovers dotted around the place, but by and large, the European days of empire are gone. We have nothing except our added value skills, academic skills, medical skills, skills in various high-tech fields, but we can't even make a computer. We can't even make a mobile phone without Bolivia. We can't make a computer without the DRC, the Congo, and the rising powers will simply not allow us to reconstitute ourselves as a European empire. Assuming Britain, not a member of the EU, is regarded as being a part of that European empire, it will never fly. It will never go off the ground. It will be like the dodo, unable to fly, plump, and a very easy target for the new kids on the block. But thanks, Eve, for that call. It's always good to have different points of view from the worldwide audience of clever people who watch the mother of all talk shows. You are one of those. Find another clever person to bring with you on Sunday for the mother of all talk shows. Most people think that Trump ditched Zelensky, but not by as wide a margin as many would have expected. Gayatri and me will be back, God willing, on Sunday for the mothership, the Sunday edition of the mother of all talk shows. See you then.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.